Aloha and welcome back to Talk Story with House Majority. My name is Della Au Belatti, House Majority Leader. Um, I hope you really enjoyed that segment on what the Domestic Violence Action Center is doing. Today we have here Chair Gregg Takayama of the House Committee on Public Safety, Veterans, and Military Affairs, also representative of District 34, Pearl City. And with him is Representative Stacelynn Eli from District 43 of the Leeward Coast. I really want them to come on and talk to us about issues of public safety, law enforcement, and we'll start off with domestic violence. Welcome.
Aloha, Della. Aloha, everyone. Mahalo, happy to be here. I think this issue of domestic violence is one that can be easily overlooked with everything that's going on. My district, we have been so busy, trying to address testing, address supporting local businesses, making sure unemployment filing is going as smoothly as possible, working on food distributions for our keiki to our kupuna, that it's unfortunate that it's easy to overlook the fact that many of our constituents, our community members that are coming through these lines that we are distributing to are also victims. So I'm really just grateful to Nancy, to DVAC, Domestic Violence Action Center, for really shedding light on this issue. It's something that's important to me and the rest of my community, as we realize that on this stay-at-home order, many of our community members are in a home that's not safe, that they're being victimized. And so, we want to reach out, and I think that it's important for us to make sure that they have access to the outreach, to the help that they're needing during this time.
Thank you, Stacy. And I know Chair Takayama, you are very concerned. I know that you do work with the YWCA. Any thoughts and comments on domestic violence and those issues that we might be seeing or might be hidden, actually?
Sure. Thanks, Della. I just want to add that, even in the normal times, domestic violence is a matter of concern for the entire community, but particularly so now when all of our families are undergoing a great deal of stress. People are unemployed, kids are home from school, and they are just adding to the normal pressures that families already have. So, I commend the terrific work that Nancy Creedman's doing with domestic violence, as well as all of our other agencies, including the YWCA. I think we all need to pitch in. We all need to share in the problems we face in terms of facing domestic violence and coming up with solutions. So, this is something that the legislature, when we come back into session, is going to take a really strong look at it in terms of how we can strengthen the efforts of the many community organizations that are focusing on this.
And I just want to make a pitch, Gregg. I know, Stacy, maybe you can explain it. I know that the Women's Legislative Caucus, they encourage donations through their virtual Easter basket drive. Can you talk a little bit about that, Stacy?
Yeah, absolutely. So every year, the Women's Legislative Caucus, we do Easter baskets from our collective offices, to distribute, to Domestic Violence Action Center, Parents and Children Together, Institute for Human Services, and even the Salvation Army. It's something that is very important to us. And even with everything that's going on with COVID, the caucus, we still made time and effort to make sure that we still put together these baskets and donations to get to, the people that need it the most.
Thank you. Thank you, Stacy, for helping lead that effort. Before we transition to the next topic, just generally about law enforcement, concerns about crime generally, I do want to make a pitch to our viewers. Please visit facebook.com/Olelo Community. Plug in your questions on the Facebook comments page. We are going to be taking questions, and I'm happy to answer any questions as House Majority Leader. Chair Takayama and Representative Eli are also here. So we want to really engage the community. If you have general questions, whether it's in their kuleana or perhaps mine, we're happy to answer them. So let's go to the issue of crime generally. And I'll start this off by just sharing, 2 weeks ago, I had a colleague living in representing Makali Moiliili, and he showed me this picture of this flaming electrical pole. I live right nearby the Hawaii rental that unfortunately was vandalized. So I think there's a lot of concerns about crime generally. Um, so did you want to speak to any of that, Stacy, about some of the concerns that you might be seeing in your community?
Yeah, I think before COVID, we were already having issues with our officers, being stretched thin, because we are short officers in this county. And with COVID and the stay-at-home order and, just everything that's been put into place up until now, it's been really hard for our community to really understand like what's going on as far as the beaches. I've had a lot of issues with tourists and even with some locals who are going into our parks. Not all of my parks have gates. Some of them were blocked off with cones and caution tape, and these things were easily pushed to the side or torn down, and people were still going in. In fact, currently at Trax Beach in my district, there are cars parked alongside the incoming lane coming into the west side, and I have surfers running across Farrington Highway to get to my beach. And it's been a concern. It's a highway. We have cars going back and forth, and we're encouraging our community members, to stay home so that we can flatten this curve, so that we can all be safe and get past this. But there's no real enforcement going on at the parks in my area. I mean, I know my officers are trying, they're doing their best, but like I said, they're stretched thin, they're understaffed, and it's just been a hard thing to really to control.
And let me weigh in here because I will be the first one to say, my family and I, we walked through Ala Moana Beach Park when we shouldn't have. And I think there's this concern about the changing nature of the stay-at-home order. So it's really important for people to listen to what those stay-at-home orders are. And we know, for example, that the city and county of Honolulu is going to be lifting some of the restrictions so that people can now walk and run through. But I think maybe the message here, and maybe Chair Takayama, you can weigh in here. I think the message really here is, one, to kind of pay attention to what those stay-at-home orders are. And then even if you're unclear, really what we need to be doing is social distancing. So while it may be now, after April 25th, okay to run through a beach park, you really have to do it quickly, and you shouldn't be in large groups. You should really only either be by yourself, wearing a mask if you can, or you are only with what they call your germ biome, with your family, your most intimate family members. You really should not be in large groups of more than 10. What do you think, Chair Takayama?
Oh, definitely, Della. I think that the message that is permeated all throughout the messaging you hear from our state and county leaders is the importance of social distancing. That's the only way we're going to keep the curve down and minimize the number of infections we suffer in the community. And just talking generally about crime, this is really an unusual time. We've never lived through a period like this. And crime actually, in general, is down. Families are at home, so burglaries are down. Bars are closed, so DUIs are down. The County of Hawaii, I just saw yesterday, came out with a statistic that overall crime is down 33% compared to the month prior to all of our shutdown. So it's really a new normal for all of us in the community to get adjusted to. And, even though traffic may be reduced substantially and fatalities are down compared to the previous last year, we still need to follow common sense rules about it, not speed, because anyone who's driven on H1, H2, H3 has seen the number of speeders that are on our highways. So we need to be careful about it. And I just think that when people are at home, and we talked about the stresses that are home, people need to get out, and exercising is fine. As you mentioned, Della, as of this coming Saturday, it'll be okay to walk through city parks for the purpose of exercising, for the purpose of jogging, and that sort of thing. So it's just something that we need to pay attention to.
Thank you. And you know that tip about not speeding is really big, because I know that in my community, within a span of 2 days, there was a Kapuna elderly man who was walking who got hit, and then there was a car that overturned right on our busy Beretania Street. So really important, if you're on the roads, to be still driving very safely.
Definitely.
Can we switch up a little bit, Chair Takayama? So there was a lot of concerns and questions about what's happening in our jails. There was this huge push for the release of inmates. Can you shed a little bit more light on that process? Because I think there's a couple of things happening there that the public doesn't really understand.
Yeah, I think the concern stems from the fact that, in normal times, we talked about social distancing, which means people should stay 6 feet away from each other. Now, in normal times, in a jail setting, you normally have 2 people sharing a cell that's about 10 feet by 12 feet. And that, in a normal situation, having 2 people in a room that size, it's almost impossible to maintain 6 feet distance from each other. Now, our jails, particularly on the neighbor islands, because they're so overcrowded, it's not unusual to have 3 or even 4 people sharing a cell of that size. So the concern naturally stems from concerns over whether the possibility of COVID-19 could spread to our jail facilities, even though inmates and detainees are in the facilities. Staff needs to come in from the community every day. Our correctional officers, our social workers, our medical staff, they're all out in the community for most of the time. So there's a strong possibility of bringing in COVID-19 from the community. And that's why there was a real push to minimize the number of inmates and detainees we have particularly in our jails, because jails are where we have people who are awaiting trial. They're arrested, brought in off the street. Half of them are in our jails for the purpose of awaiting trial. They can't post bail. So what has been happening is that our public safety department has been working with police and prosecutors in trying to keep down the number of people who are arrested and brought into our jails. What the police and prosecutors have been doing has been trying to divert them as much as possible from actually serving time in jail, instead diverting them when appropriate to rehabilitation, drug facilities, if in cases of mental health problems, to mental health facilities. And over the past month and a half, they've decreased the number of inmates that we normally have by about 600. So as a result, the jails and prisons is the lowest it's been in more than 20 years, while at the same time doing our best to preserve public safety. Now, what's happened is that more recently, the Office of Public Defender has asked the Supreme Court to take a step further and further reduce the number of people we have in our prisons and jails. And so what's happened since then is that the Supreme Court has taken what I think is a sensible action at the urging of the governor and legislators, which is to not release inmates en masse, but to take each of them on a case-by-case basis. And in other words, determine whether the inmate poses a threat to public safety, and just as importantly, whether that inmate has a place to go. We don't want to have them released and further burden our homeless facilities, which are already stretched to the maximum. So in a nutshell, that's what's happening as we speak, is that the Supreme Court is reviewing cases on a case-by-case basis to see whether, if it's appropriate for an inmate to be released early, then to do so, but in a way that respects the need for public safety.
I agree with you, Chair Takayama. I think that is a sensible approach, the case-by-case nature. Can you speak to a little bit about, there's a partnership with the Federal Detention Center?
Oh, definitely. Normally, the Oahu Community Correctional Center, our jail on Oahu, leases some space from the Federal Detention Center. we normally have about 150 to 175 detainees there, and we pay the feds for the cost of each cell that's used. Well, what happened several weeks ago is that the feds stopped accepting new inmates from OCCC. And so the governor appealed to the president to ask that that restriction be lifted. So as a result, we're back to normal, and we are again able to send about 150 to 175 detainees to the Federal Detention Center. And that's helped a lot in alleviating the overcrowding at OCCC.
And I know that in both Federal Detention Center and in our local jails and local prisons, the administrations are very concerned. And so they're testing and wanting to make sure that there is no COVID spread within those facilities because of the health of those inmates.
Oh, definitely. Every incoming person is detainee or arrestee is screened and if necessary, subjected to a test. And as a result, we've had no cases of COVID-19 in any of our jails and facilities. And knock on wood, the policies and operations of our Department of Public Safety continue to maintain that record, which is really important. Once it gets in, it'd be very difficult to control.
So I know we're watching that carefully, Chair Takayama. We have one question, and I want to thank all of our viewers. Again, this is the opportunity for you to weigh in. I don't know if we're going to be able to answer this satisfactorily, but it's a question from Alan Smithy, who's asking, are you making plans for civil unrest if this lockdown continues? I can try to tackle it. Chair Takayama, do you want to try to tackle that?
I think that's a question. The governor has activated 1,200 members of the Hawaii National Guard, as we heard earlier from General Kauivi. In a case of civil unrest, they would play an important role in helping our local law enforcement authorities. But thankfully, up till now, I think the spirit of cooperation among all of our communities has been very strong. And I think just in case there should be cases of unrest, I am fairly sure that our National Guard and law enforcement authorities would be ready to act.
I would weigh in on that too and just echo that because I do think that it really is incumbent on the public. I'm so proud of my neighbors, as I think you are too, Stacelynn, right? It's really going to be important about public cooperation. So, Chair Takayama, you were talking about this a little earlier, the new normal. What are we doing? What do you guys see as the new normal as we start to move forward? And we'll, again, please continue to send in your questions, but I want to turn to this new question. Stacy, do you feel like you can tackle that? What do you see as part of the new normal? Because we're already starting to talk about, in the House side at least, a phased approach of reopening. What do you see is going to be important for this new normal?
I think everything about the current situation that we're in is not normal. Every day, something different happens in my district. Every hour, I feel like we're addressing different needs out in our community. Like how I had shared earlier, we're trying to support our local businesses, address unemployment, address food distribution, and make sure our keiki and our kupuna, have meals, our families are taken care of. And I just think until we can really see progress as far as flattening the curve and we hear the word vaccine, I think it may be too soon to even visualize what the new normal will be. I think we're still just trying to redefine what that's gonna be, at least in my district. There's so many things that was brought to light, because of COVID, new things that as a community leader, as a representative, I have to look at and see how we can address. And so I don't know what the new normal is gonna be because everything that we are experiencing is unprecedented. Like Gregg had said, we have never lived through something like this before. So I think I don't know what the new normal is gonna be. I don't think anyone really knows. I know that we definitely need to take a look at, the current infrastructure that we have set in place for certain things. And, I think we recognize that there's areas of improvement, even as leaders, that we can work on. But normal, I don't even know what that word is anymore. You know,
Yeah. You know what? I think that's completely okay, Stacy, because I don't think any one of us knows. So Chair Takayama and I have a bit more years on us than you. Chair, you want to weigh on what is the new normal? What's going to be the better normal? Who knows?
Well, I agree completely with Stacy in terms of us facing something that we've never faced before, or hopefully never will again. One of the things that is probably going to happen is that as we look at reopening, before we can do that, we have to increase the number of testing that's done in our community, just to make sure that we know where the so-called hotspots are, and to devote more resources to those areas. And I think furthermore that in terms of reopening, it'll probably be done on an island by island basis. For example, the island of Kauai, which has a really minimal number of infections, will probably be in line to be one of the first counties to reopen gradually, and followed by perhaps Oahu and Maui and the rest. So I think that as we look at the new normal, and by the way, one of the good positive things that I've seen in our communities is the way that we've all come together. We've all cooperated. I mean, there are volunteers who are more than anxious to help deliver meals to our kupuna who are shut in their homes and sometimes are unable to access grocery and stores for shopping. We see people who are sharing with neighbors as much as possible while maintaining safe social distancing. We see that kind of spirit of community throughout all of our neighborhoods, and that's something I hope we keep. I think keeping that is really consistent with our aloha spirit. And so regardless of whatever happens in the next weeks or months and years ahead, I think there are some things that are positive that are coming out of it.
Thank you, Chair Takayama. Thank you, Representative Eli. Mahalo, and thank you for joining us on our very first Talk Story with House Majority. I want to thank all of our guests, Brigadier General Moses Ka'oiwi Jr., Joint Task Force Commander of the Hawaii National Guard, Representative Stacelynn Eli, State Representative for District 23, the Leeward Coast of Oahu, and Representative Gregg Takayama, District 34, Pearl City, and Chair of the House Committee on Public Safety, Veterans, and Military Affairs. For those of you who tuned in for our special guest, Mayor Derek Kawakami sends his regrets. He could not join us, but maybe we will get him on for a future show. I'd like to say that we might have some future shows on testing. As Chair Takayama alluded to, that's going to be something that's very important, that's on people's top of minds currently. From me, Della Belatti, House Majority Leader, I just want to leave you with these last final messages. It's really important to stay up to date during these challenging times. Please follow the House Majority on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at High House Dems for our most recent updates. You can also visit our new website at hawaiihousedemocrats.com, which has resources, press releases, and valuable information on how the House Majority is responding to COVID-19. I want to send out a huge mahalo to my staff, Sherry Nishijima and Grace Tiernan, as well as my research staff, Robert Choi, Casey Hines, all the great attorneys in the House Majority Staff Office and our Communications Office, Carolyn Tanaka and James Gonzer. We're doing all that we can to keep you informed. We'll see you next Wednesday at noon on Talk Story with House Majority. Aloha.